Adkins, come back. Said Adkins, I'm surprised. How many shots in a row? 6 or 7 shots in a row. I'm really drunk. I was calling Adkins more than he is so long. Go for you, looking around, looking more than he is so well. I'm drunk. He's not. End of message.
My name is Barry Adkins, and I'm not the right guy to be here telling you this story. I'm only here because my son Kevin passed away due to alcohol poisoning at 18 years old.
Great. Welcome back to Voices Unfiltered. Barry, before we started recording, I told you something I've been thinking about while preparing for this conversation. I have twin boys who are 20 years old, so this conversation doesn't feel abstract to me. Your son Kevin was 18, but today I want people watching this to meet Kevin through you, not just through the story that followed. Tell me about Kevin as a person before everything changed.
A little bit about Kevin when he was younger. Well, first of all, he wasn't a very good student. He was a lot like me, but he was a really kind person. He actually befriended a boy named David when he was in 3rd grade. David was in a wheelchair. Nothing wrong with David except his legs didn't work. But because he was in a wheelchair, it made it a little harder for him to make friends. Kevin was that guy. He made sure that David got out to the playground and back to class and to the bus and those kinds of things. And when they could talk David's mom into it, she would drop him off over to our house. 3rd grade boys, they had unusual rules. And one of the rules those two boys had was that wheelchair stayed at the front door. It never went in the house. And everybody's probably wondering, well, how does this kid get around? Well, he was a pretty small kid, and he could kind of get up on his arms and army crawl around the house. But Kevin didn't have a lot of patience, so if he's in the living room and wants to go to the bedroom, he would just go grab David by his arms and drag him through the house and drag him in the backyard. They had a lot of fun together. As he got older, he got his driver's license and his cell phone. He used to come home and tell me stories that honestly scared me to death, because he's that guy that stops on the freeway and gives a complete stranger a ride or helps them change a tire, whatever they needed. He would do it.
Barry, that's amazing. I mean, he sounded like an amazing human being. And as a son, what was he like?
He was a good kid. I mean, he was a boy. He was very hyper. And as I said, not a very good student, but we really didn't have any problems with him. I mean, his high school principal didn't even know who he was, and I considered that a good thing. But he never really got in any trouble. He was very involved in the FFA, which is the Future Farmers of America. So he was raising pigs, and neighbor had mules, not horses, but mules, and he'd go out riding mules with them, and he drove a pickup truck and had a cowboy hat and all that good kind of stuff.
Barry, Kevin then turns 18. What excited him about turning 18?
Well, he had graduated from high school. He got out a job right out of high school working for an electrician, making good money. And he met my financial requirements because he wanted to go buy a new truck, right? And I'm hoping he'll find a new truck from a private party. I'll go down to the credit union, sign papers, and get out of there in about 5 minutes, right? And he found one at a dealership. And here in the U.S., I hate to say it, but when you go into a dealership, they're usually trying to sell you a bunch of stuff you don't want or need, right? So I got to sign papers at a dealership. And I go down there and sit down in the financial guy's office. The first thing that guy said to me was, how about some life insurance? And I said, look, dude, I'm not here for life insurance. I don't need any life insurance. My wife will do just fine if something happens to me. And he said, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about your son. I'm that guy. I'm that guy who rather indignantly told him that 18-year-old boys don't need life insurance because they don't die. But I was wrong. They do die. He wouldn't live long enough to make a single payment on that truck.
Barry, what was your relationship with Kevin like in that final year? I mean, I've got twin boys, like I said, and a bit of testosterone and...
Yes, they are. They're all about their friends and not about you, right?
Yeah.
You know, he was very busy with his friends, getting him to do stuff around the house. And, you know, he wanted to move out, right? And trying to get him to do stuff around the house was just, it was painful. I'm not going to deny that. I mean, you tell him, hey, it's your turn to empty the dishwasher. It was tough to get him to do that. It was that kind of stuff. And come out home, and when you get home, wake me up. Let me know that you're home, that kind of stuff. It was those kinds of things that we had a little bit of challenges with. It was kind of interesting with Sharon because that old truck, he was driving an old truck and he expected me to be his mechanic, and it always needed things done to it. And he didn't like it because I would tell him, hey, I'll fix it, but you need to be here with me to watch what I'm doing, and he pushed back on that a lot, but I'd let it sit there. I'm like, okay, well, you're going to have to get a ride some other way because I'm not going to fix it unless you're here. So, it's the usual stuff with boys, they want to go be with their friends, and that's fine. But we did a lot of stuff together. We used to go play golf together, and we used to go hunting together and those kinds of things. And they were fun because, you get away from everything. The one thing I always enjoyed about hunting was not necessarily killing something, but just being out in the woods alone, right? Going out for a hike, sit someplace for a while. He liked doing that stuff too, a lot.
Yeah, Kevin's expectation of you being his mechanic and my boy's expectation of me being their bank manager. So
Yes. Oh yeah, there was times where it was in the early days of cell phone, but he called me and, hey, I'm at a gas station. I'm out of gas and I don't have any money. So I had to run $20 over to him. Right. And of course we jawed about it a little bit, because they expect you to kind of manage all that for them. It's like, well, you got a job, you know what to do.
Barry, I want to take you back to the salesman and when he spoke about the life insurance. Did you ever feel that it was so peculiar that he would mention something like that?
No, I mean, again, I'm that guy. It didn't even occur to me that he was ever going to die. As a parent, I don't know about you, but the thought of my child ever dying never crossed my mind. I never went there. I mean, you worry about them, but thought of them actually dying never crossed my mind.
Barry, can you take me back to the day when Kevin moved out?
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So a couple weeks before he moved out, he came into our living room. We have this brown chair that sits in front of a big picture window that looks out over our backyard. And he sat down in that brown chair and started talking about how he couldn't believe his life was finally beginning and he wanted to move out. And I did my best to discourage him because honestly, we really never had any problems with him. His high school principal didn't even know who he was. And I considered that a good thing. But I didn't have any luck talking him out of it. So a couple weeks later, his buddy Craig came over and they started the process of moving him out. His definition of moving out was throwing a bed, a TV, and a dresser in the back of his new truck. And he went back into his bedroom and his clothing system was a pile of clean, wrinkled clothes on the floor next to a pile of dirty clothes. He never folded any clothes. He grabbed a pair of the clean jeans, threw them in the dryer to de-wrinkle, came in the living room and told me something I've never forgotten. He said he wasn't going to take his toothbrush with him. He'd be back tomorrow morning and grab it. I walked out front with him like I normally do, gave him a hug, told him that I loved him and to be careful, and watched him drive away. It was the last time I saw him alive.
Barry, when did you realize that something was wrong?
So what happened that night, they decided to throw a little housewarming party for Kevin. He was moving into a house with few other people. And obviously there was beer and there was hard alcohol there. He left a voicemail for his sister talking about how drunk he was and how much fun he was having. He passed out a short time after that. His friends laid him in his bed on his side in case he vomited, but the party was still going on. They actually went in and shaved his head and his legs while he was passed out because he's just passed out, right? But his buddy Craig was worried about him and kept going back in to check on him. Around 4 a.m., calls started coming into 911. First calls were difficulty breathing. Next calls were not breathing. My son died alone in a hospital while I slept peacefully in my bed. The next morning was Sunday morning. My wife and I are sitting around drinking coffee, talking about what we're going to do or not do that day. At about 8:30 in the morning, the doorbell rings, and we're looking at each other because we weren't expecting company. And I open the door and I see 2 police officers and somebody in plain clothes at my front door. Should have been a big red flag, right? It should have been. But again, I'm that guy. It didn't even occur to me that something bad had happened. I actually joked with them as they came in, thinking this had to have something to do with a dog or a car. I didn't know. But they didn't laugh at any of my jokes. One of the officers and the person in plain clothes stayed by the front door. The other officer walked in and stood in front of that brown chair that Kevin had sat in 2 weeks before and talked about how his life was finally beginning. He said there'd been an accident. Your son is dead. We asked who, because we have a number of children. They said it was Kevin and handed me his driver's license. There's something pretty final about it when a police officer hands you your child's driver's license, because until that exact moment in time, you're holding out hope that this is all a big mistake. You have misspelled the last name. Get out of here. You need to be 3 streets over, or at least next door, right? Any place but my place. But when they hand you your child's driver's license, you know he's gone and he's never coming back.
How did you process that news? I mean, was there a feeling of numbness or?
It's a feeling of numbness. It's a feeling of the world stopped spinning and thinking this has got to be a dream or something. It's basically the world stopped spinning at that point. You can't understand why people are still driving down the road. You don't understand how anybody's going on or how the world is still happening because your child is dead. It was a very difficult time. And to be clear, I was angry with God. I didn't understand why he would take my son. A good God would take me and let my son live, right? And I tried to tell God that. I said, hey, back up time. You're God. You got control of this thing. Back up time. Take me and let him live. And I don't think I'm unusual to think that way. A couple days later, I had another life-changing event. I'm going to do my best to describe this here. I was laying in bed. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was wide awake. I just had that sensation that someone had walked in the room. You had that before, probably when someone walks in behind you, they're there. And then there was a light I'd never seen before and haven't seen since. And there was a message. And the message was that Kevin didn't suffer and something very good would come from this. And before I knew it, that light was gone. I didn't get to cross-examine. Why God would choose me for a mission like this is a complete mystery to me, because I'm just not that kind of guy. Before this happened, I'm go to work and come home and stay home on the weekends and don't go anywhere. Right. But that message changed everything for me. And it didn't make everything okay, but it did give me a mission.
Barry, how did Kevin pass away?
It was alcohol poisoning. His blood alcohol content was 0.36%, which is very, very drunk. Yeah, that's very drunk. And what I tell everybody there is, if you're ever in that situation where somebody's passed out, think about Kevin's buddy Craig. It's a night he's never going to forget, I promise you.
People often talk about grief as something that follows stages, but I imagine it doesn't feel structured when you're living it. What were your first few weeks like?
Well, a lot of it was you expected him to pop through the door and go, I got you with that, right? And just not really understanding that, he's never coming back. And keep in mind, this is about 20 years in the rearview mirror for me. But I have a different perspective on it now, because, and some of this may sound harsh, but it's not meant to be. For the longest time, I wanted to feel the way I did before he passed away. I wanted to go back and feel that. Somehow I wanted to feel that way again. But the reality is, you're never going to feel that way again. That loved one is gone, and the old you is gone, just like that loved one is. There's a new you there that you have to reinvent, and it's up to you to define what that reinvention looks like. And it took a long time to come to grips with the fact that I'm never going to feel that way again.
And sometimes the new you doesn't mean it's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, how was your relationship with your wife and the other children in the house, and the relationship amongst all of them, actually, between each other?
I had some pretty hard and fast rules. I don't generally, but one of the things that I refused to do was to play the blame game, because it's not going to fix anything. It's not going to bring him back. We know things happened. There's nothing any of us can do to change the past. The only thing we have control of is the future. And as you alluded to, it's up to us to define what that looks like. I'm still in contact regularly with his friends. I talked to Craig probably a month ago. All of his friends are now grown up and married and have children of their own. And all of them have said it was a life-changing event for them too.
I hear you're surrounded by a lot of love and family and attention. But what does grief actually feel like in those quiet moments when you're alone and nobody actually sees it?
You're never going to forget, right? And there are moments when it comes back. The best way I can describe it is it's a scab. It's a wound that heals over. There's a scab there, but you don't know what thing might rip that scab off. It might be something somebody says. It might be a song. It might be something you heard. It might be someplace you are. Or if I saw a truck that looked like his old truck, that kind of thing. And to be honest, when I tell the story, there are times where it's tough for me to get through it. I mean, I've told the story probably 400 or 500 times over the last 20 years. And there are still moments where I have to pause and take a deep breath. Even though I've done it hundreds of times, it still feels real. It still feels like you're sitting there and that police officer's in the room.
Most people, they would kind of withdraw after a loss like that, particularly after a child. Barry, you did something different. You started walking. Why walking?
Well, let me describe that part of the story. So we decided to have Kevin cremated, and I got a call a few days later that I could come and pick up his remains. So I walk into a funeral home. They've got nice pictures on the wall. They're playing music in the background. They take me into an office, sit me down in a big, comfortable chair, the desk in front of me. And a funeral director walks in, sets an urn down in front of me, an urn that holds all the remains of the kid that I coached baseball, basketball, soccer, football. I taught him to shoot a gun and swing a golf club. All the remains of him were sitting in an urn in front of me. But there's one thing I knew at that point, and that was that I didn't want to be a victim, because the world doesn't need any more victims. We've got plenty already. The world needs people who take something bad and they make something very good come from it. And I thought about what I would hope somebody else would do if it happened to their kid. And for me, it was pretty easy. It was to get out and tell the story, not for the money, because there is no money in the world that'll fix the hurt. It doesn't exist. The only thing that helps is to try to make something very good come from such a senseless tragedy. So now we got to decide, what are we going to do with his ashes, right? I grew up in Kalispell, Montana. It's up in the northwest corner of Montana, way far north by the Canadian border. And Kevin had been there a number of times and always talked about wanting to move there someday and buy a ranch. So we decided to take his ashes to Montana. The normal thing to do would be put them in your car and drive there, right? But I decided to put them in my backpack and walk 1,400 miles from Gilbert, Arizona to Kalispell, Montana, and tell the story along the way. Because I guarantee you, you don't ever want to go through this.
1,400 miles. How long did that take you?
It took about 4 months. We could probably talk for another hour about the walk, by the way, Bashir. It took about 4 months. I averaged a little over 90 miles a week. I told the story, 30 or 35 times along the way, met a lot of wonderful people. You discover that when you get out and do something like that, there's just a lot of wonderful people out there that just want to help. If it was raining out, every car that went past me would stop and ask if I wanted a ride.
What happened emotionally during that journey, beside meeting the people within you?
I found a way to forgive myself and to accept the fact that it happened. And I heard a pastor describe it once. He said that anger and vengeance lead to one thing: destruction. Forgiveness leads to healing. And sometimes the most important person you need to forgive is yourself. We all make mistakes. It's the way you handle it that matters.
You said you forgive yourself, or you forgave yourself. Did you ever feel responsible for what happened to Kevin initially?
Absolutely. The number one job of a parent, number one, number two, all the way down to 100, is to keep your kid alive, right? And I didn't get that done. And at some point, if you're in that situation, you think a lot about things you maybe should have done differently. I don't beat myself up about them, but I know, again, I can't change the past. All I can do is try to change the future. And that's been my mantra, is I can't do anything about what happened to him. All I can do is something to react to it.
You've walked 1,400 miles. You've told the story probably 500 times. Barry, what keeps you telling Kevin's story?
What keeps me telling it is that I don't know what something very good will come from this means. And I've had people tell me, and people have written articles saying, we think something very good has come from this already. And I don't disagree with that, but I don't know if it's the something very good. And I think that's my job, is to chase that the rest of my life. I don't have any doubt about that. That's going to be my thing. And that's why this isn't the end of the story yet.
What do young people actually misunderstand about alcohol, Barry?
They misunderstand that it can happen to them. No one ever believes these things are going to happen. No one ever believes they're going to become an addict. They just don't believe that it'll happen to them. With young people, I think the big thing is they don't have that critical thinking, right? That part of their brain is not developed. But when I talk at schools, I don't talk about any of that stuff. In fact, I start with something pretty simple, and that is that I'm just here to tell you a story. And as you listen to this story, maybe think about what you want your story to be. And that's the way I start it, because I want them to understand I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I just want you to hear the story. And I think it's a God thing. You can hear a pin drop in the room when I tell the story.
It's extremely, extremely touching and brave of you. But I know I did say, what do young people misunderstand about alcohol? But as parents, what are we overlooking? When do we know that it's gone too far or too much?
I guess, and again, I'm not an expert in that field, but be suspicious as parents. And kids have to understand that you're looking out for their best interest. And if you suspect something's happening, there's a good chance it's happening. And they do a very good job of disguising things. I'm often asked, do you know if Kevin drank before that? I had suspected it a couple times, but I wasn't sure what had happened. And I never really, we talked a lot about drugs in our family and the dangers there, but we didn't talk a lot about alcohol, because we have a relative who's an alcoholic. And Kevin always talked about how stupid he was and how he was never going to let that happen to him. So I wrongly assumed that he knew better. But you get in a party and people start talking, and the next thing you know, especially here in the United States, they're drinking way, way, way too much.
And you mentioned drugs and you mentioned alcohol, and one would assume alcohol being the lesser evil. And
I don't know that I would say that. They're very closely related, and alcohol quite often is a gateway, because people make bad decisions. You know this. You've probably been around people that were drinking, and when they're drinking, they make some pretty bad decisions that can lead to lifelong consequences. Somebody could convince them to try something when they're drinking. They'll go, oh, yeah, sure, I'll try that. So I don't know that it's the lesser of the two evils. I would say they're pretty closely related. In the U.S., I don't know. I'm sure we have statistics on that. But in the U.S., what we call the rehab industry for drugs and alcohol is $35 billion a year. It is
wow.
a gigantic industry here. I mean, there's rehab facilities everywhere around. And sadly, a lot of the statistics kind of get missed because they drink too much one night, or they take the wrong drug, and they end up with mental illnesses that end up being lifelong things, whether it's bipolar disorders or schizophrenia. The people on the streets here, not all, but a lot of them, you can trace it back to one of those two things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I do what I do, because we got to shut the faucet off.
You could have done that walk without Kevin's ashes, but you chose to carry the ashes with you. Why? Was that to remind you every day?
That was to remind me every day, because I wanted to know why I was doing this, because the why is what it's all about, right? I wanted to honor my son, and I wanted to raise awareness. And if I just felt like, well, I'm going to have to put him in my backpack and walk there. The idea to walk to Montana is a little bit obscure. One of Kevin's favorite movies was something called Lonesome Dove. It was about a 3.5-hour movie. It had Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall in it. It was a Western. And suffice to say, in that movie, something happened that gave me the idea to walk to Montana. And I won't give it away for the audience. So when they watch the movie, they'll know in that movie, that's That's where I got the idea to do it. And initially, I wasn't going to do all the speaking stuff, right? I was just going to put in my backpack and walk there. The idea had to evolve a little bit, right? First idea was I was just going to walk the Continental Divide. I wasn't going to do all the speaking stuff, but again, I think it's a God thing. I kind of modified the way I was thinking about it, and I knew that I wanted to tell the story. And as you can imagine, a lot of people tried to talk me out of it. I was actually still employed. I'm not independently wealthy. I was still employed. My employer tried to talk me out of it. I had well-meaning relatives try to talk me out of it because I think they were afraid I was going to fail. And you can't blame them for being worried about that. But I had one guy say something to me that I'll never forget. He said, we were talking about it, and I was saying, well, I don't know. I think I'm going to do it, but I haven't really committed to it yet. And he said, well, how do you think you'd feel about it in 5 years if you don't do it? Yeah. And for me, that sealed the deal. I was going to make this happen.
It's almost like failure wasn't an option at that point.
We could have failed. There's a lot of things that could have gone wrong. I could have got hurt. I could have got sick. I didn't have any sick days or weather days. And that isn't to say that I didn't start wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Did I ever think about quitting? No, I never thought about quitting. But I started wondering what I'd gotten myself into. I was probably about 150 miles from Gilbert. I had gone from 1,300 feet of elevation to about 7,500 feet, up and down over a lot of hills. It was cold and rainy and miserable. And I really started wondering what I got myself into because I still had 1,200 miles to go and I was not feeling it. I was not feeling it. But I realized that I wasn't thinking about it right. And this is probably a great metaphor for life. I stopped thinking about 3 more states and started thinking about walking another 3 miles, take a break, get up and do it again. And I blocked out those 3 states because it was driving me crazy thinking about that. And it's a great metaphor for life because you look at something off in the distance that you want to do and you think, oh, there's no way I can get there. But what can you do today? Start heading that direction.
Barry, what decision do you wish Kevin had made that day?
I wish he was still here with me. As much as a lot of really good things that have come from it, I'd still like him here. He'd have kids by now and he'd be a lot like his friends, living his life.
Well, it's such a, again, emotional and touching story.
So there's more to the story yet, Sharon, and I'm going to share it with you here. I walked to Montana to raise awareness around what happened to my son. I've told the story hundreds of times. And one of the questions I'm often asked is, what's next for you? And my response is usually a little bit jaded. Well, I wrote a book, by the way, and I walked to Montana. Does there have to be a next? But then it occurred to me that maybe what's next has nothing to do with me and everything to do with motivating others to get out and do something like what I did. So we're going to be doing something called the Million Mile Challenge. And what that means is everybody can sign up. They can give us a story and a picture. We'll log your miles and see if we can all walk together and get to 1,000,000 miles and tell these stories because they're out there for sure and they're everywhere. And people need to know that they're not alone. And those stories need to be told.
And these stories are not necessarily with the loss of alcohol or drug abuse. It's just primarily losing somebody that you love, right?
No, this is going to be more about prevention. It can be someone that you lost to drugs or alcohol. Your loved one might have been killed by a drunk driver. Everybody knows somebody who's been impacted by drugs and alcohol. It's just, I don't know that I've met anybody who doesn't know someone when they start thinking about it that has lost that battle. So it could be they walk for someone who has lost that battle. They could walk for someone who's struggling with addiction today, or they can walk for themselves. We just want to hear the stories because those stories are out there and they need to be told.
After everything you've lived through, what keeps you walking forward today?
My faith. I just know that he's got a plan for me and I'm obedient, or at least I try to be obedient. And stepping out of your comfort zone is a big part of life. Do things that make you feel uncomfortable. Am I comfortable about the 1,000,000 Mile Challenge? Absolutely not, for sure. There's a lot of unknowns there, but God put it on my heart and I'm going to try to figure out how to make it happen. And
So
I think
has
that's
your purpose.
it's my purpose. It really is. And you have to be married to a very loving woman who understands these things because, when I told her I was going to walk to Montana, we stood in the kitchen and cried for 10 minutes because it's terrifying.
It is 1,400 miles. I know we spoke of forgiveness and you spoke about forgiving yourself, but what does forgiveness actually look like in real life after something like this?
It's about letting go. It really is. It's about letting go of the past. For me, that's what it is. You have to learn to let go of things that happened and move on. And if you don't let go, you're never going to be able to forgive yourself.
Do you think when they say time is a great healer, that it's actually true? Does forgiveness take time?
Forgiveness takes time. Healing takes time, but you have to let go. And I have seen a number of documentaries and people who have lost loved ones, whether it's through murder or whatever, and they struggle with the letting go part of it. And that's not that you're ignoring the fact that they never lived, because we talk about Kevin still to this day. But you have to let go of what happened. And if you don't let go of it, you're gonna struggle in life. And I've seen it you've probably seen it too. Someone that loses a loved one and they never recover from it. They just never go back to find the joy in life. For whatever reason, they can't let go of it. And for me, that's sad to see, because your loved one, I promise you, would tell you, let go of it, man. You need to move on.
During the walk, was there a moment where something shifted inside you, or had that shift begun before the walk?
I think that the shift began before the walk. There was a lot of really neat things that happened on the walk. Probably my favorite was I had spoke at Flagstaff High School, and I was about, 3 or 4 days walking north of there. And I saw a car go by and the brake lights go on. And I think, okay, I'm going to take a little break and talk to this person. And the guy gets out and he comes up and says, "Did you speak at Flagstaff High School a few days ago?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he said, he gave me a hug and thanked me and said for the first time, his son came home and told him about what happened in school that day. And it's things like that to this day that keep me going. It really is. It's the feedback from people about how it changed the way they look at stuff.
It's those small little wins, isn't it, that
Yeah.
makes it worthwhile sometimes. Barry, I actually can't thank you enough. To be this brave and thank you so much for trusting this space with your story. It's so close to home for you, and I hope that the listeners out there pay attention to it, take heed wherever it might be, and also offer some sort of solace to those who've lost loved ones. And I thank you again for joining me. And we'll look out for that 1,000,000-mile challenge for sure.
It probably will start the 1st of July. The website isn't up yet. I don't know when this will go live, but we'll get it done. We'll get it done.
Yeah, we'll get it done. I believe you can. I believe you can. Thank you, Barry. Much appreciated.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Visharan.
Most welcome. Thank you, Barry. Ciao for now.